Hi, I'm Mindy. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be wrapping up everything I read and watched for Old School April, all the month of April, created by Slime and Slashers, and with lots of amazing hosts that I will try to have linked all down below so you can check them out. And I read a lot. I watched even more. So probably going to go pretty quick through these so this isn't an hour long or something. But the first thing that I read in April was the first two books in the Blackwater series by Michael McDowell. This is a bind up of all 6 sections. Each section is about 120 pages, and it was kind of a serialized story. And this is a Southern Gothic story with a lot of family drama and small town Southern drama. And that's the main part of this. There's a lot of atmosphere with the river and the swamp and the small town, and it's a period piece, kind of. It goes from 1919 through the 1940s and maybe even farther because I am still not quite to the end. But the first 2 books were called The Flood and The Levee, and the book starts out with a flood. And the whole town is underwater. They have to evacuate, and 2 of the townspeople go in a boat looking through the town that is like pretty much submerged, and they find this woman in the hotel that has been there for days apparently, and they rescue her, and then she becomes kind of like one of the main characters in this whole series, and it's very mysterious how she was in this hotel for days. It's mostly about the southern atmosphere and the small town gossip and drama and all that, and the horror is very light in this series, but there are some like shocking things that happen, and there's very, very little supernatural elements, but they're in there. Really like this series, and I'm finishing up this week for Horror Mayhem. Next thing I finished was an audiobook for Pinata by Leopoldo Gout, and this is a horror book that took place mostly in Mexico about a woman who goes to Mexico to work on this building or refurbishing an old building into a new hotel, and some very weird things start to happen that have to do with local lore, and it's a bit of a possession story that follows them back into America. Really, really excellent story. Probably my favorite read of the month. It was definitely 5 stars. The next thing I finished was The Sound and the Fury by William Faulkner. This was the first try to read William Faulkner, and I did not like this book pretty much at all. This is a very odd story. I would say that it is kind of a snapshot of a place in time, like the South, the South in the 1920s. And I'm glad I didn't live in that time, I guess. None of the characters were likable, and it was full of racism, sexism, of all kinds. There's a lot of slurs starting from like the first paragraph. Yeah. So, like, the mother, this follows a bunch of kids, and the mother is like a hypochondriac, always in bed, always sick, and can take care of the kids. And they are taken care of by this black house servant, and and she is like a second mother to them because she does all the raising basically. And but they just treat, they like love her obviously, but then they'll say some really just horrible messed up things about her because she's black. Like, where did that come from? Like, really, would people think this way? Maybe, but that is just, I mean, it's just awful. I couldn't get past it. I would say that the writing was not particularly nice. I don't know what all the hype is about Faulkner. Like, most of it is written in the dialect of the time, and it's written phonetically, like how they would have said it, like in lots of non grammatically correct sentences and just slang and whatever, however they talked at the time. So that's not like beautiful. It's kind of annoying, but um, but it didn't bother me too much. That part didn't bother me, other than the slurs. But then it would go into a random sentence that is like trying to be beautiful, I guess. That is like incomprehensible nonsense, gibberish. Like, these are English words, but they make no sense together, kind of thing. But most of it was just like, seemed very elementary. Like, it was just not good. I just am not down with this kind of writing, I guess. But some of the story was interesting enough, if not a bit sexist. Uh, but, you know, there were some juicy moments that made me bring the rating up to a 2 instead of a 1. And that's about all I have to say about that book. I also read Hellhound by Ken Greenhall. This is a reprint of an older book from the 70s. This was a book club book, also hosted by Kelly Hooked on Books. And it's a good, short, sweet story, and I actually really like this. This is about a killer dog, well, and you get to be inside the mind of the dog and see what he's thinking. Baxter. And Baxter kills his owners and then ends up with a boy who is just as messed up as him. And surprisingly, I like the killer dog more than the kid, the boy in this story. Like, he's messed up. But really entertaining horror story. Okay, I also finished Mothered by Zoe Stage, and this is a pandemic story. It takes place all during the pandemic. A mother moves in with a daughter to help financial situations, and there's a lot of mystery and family secrets, stuff like that come out. They have like a strained relationship, and yeah, it was a ride, and I did enjoy reading it. I don't think it was particularly special or like something I'm gonna think about for a long time, but I did really love the last paragraph. It like added a lot to the story, I thought. Great last paragraph. I'll probably remember that paragraph for a long time. Towards the end of the month, I threw in a graphic novel, Eternal Blue. It's a spirit box graphic novel written by Jim Kruger, art by Amilcar Pina, I think how you say it. But Spirit Box is a band that I really like, and this is a graphic novel with some of the concepts from the Eternal Blue album. And they are very interesting concepts and stories. Yeah, I like some of the ideas in this story, but it wasn't the best execution. It wasn't like a favorite graphic novel, even though it has some of the weirdest, most bizarre things that I would usually love in a story. So, love the ideas. And at the end of the month, I finished a couple of books that I was working through most of the month because they were really long. And the first one is a audiobook for Skeleton Crew by Stephen King. And I had a few very standout stories that I loved so much, and the rest were either okay or not great. But the standout amazing stories were The Mist and The Raft was really good. And I also liked, well, what was that one called? The Jaunt. The Jaunt I liked quite a bit as well. So 3 really good stories in 20 stories. I mean, not my favorite collection, but it was pretty worth it for those stories. And the book that I was working on the entire month and finally finished at the end was Carrying Comfort by Dan Simmons. It is a big book. It's over 700 pages. And this is a vampire story, but the vampires are a lot different than the typical vampires. It starts off with vampires in that are Nazis and, you know, doing horrible things to inmates. And then it goes into more modern times and what those vampires are doing. Modern times for this book, which was the 80s. There was the vampires were all completely despicable and gross. Well, yeah. And some parts in here did not age well. Again, you know, since they were Nazis, these vampires are very racist. Yes. So, racism and sexism again. There's one of the vampires that is like a movie producer or something, and he's just very gross in a sexist kind of way. But then it becomes that character gets a little bit better as the book goes on. But I could not stand him at first. There are some trigger warnings in this book. And the last book that I squeezed in the last couple days of the month was The Girl Next Door by Jack Ketchum, which was surprisingly fast read for being over 300 pages, about 350 pages. But did I like this book? I mean, it was not fun to read. It was brutal. It has the worst content in here possible and should not be taken lightly to read. It's also based on true events, so that makes it even worse. I mean, it is bad. It is really bad. But Jack Ketchum obviously knows how to write a story that keeps you reading and keeps you hooked. Whether I wish I was reading it, I don't know. Old School April was also a watchathon, so I watched a lot of movies. A lot of movies and TV shows. So the TV shows, there were three of them. I watched one episode of each. I watched one episode from season one of X Files from 1993, the pilot episode of Dawson's Creek from 1998 as a watch party, and the pilot of Friends from 1994 as well. So, and those are some of my favorite shows. So I was glad to go back and watch them. Haven't seen them in so long. Okay, so now the movies. I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 movies that I watched in April. The first one was Fight Club from 1999. Just an unforgettable movie with Edward Norton and Brad Pitt, based on that Chuck Palahniuk book that I really enjoy. So glad I rewatched that one. Then I watched Buffy the Vampire Slayer from 1992 as a watch party. The watch parties were all so much fun, watching with people and chatting in the comments about the movie. Buffy the Vampire Slayer is so cheesy and campy and fun. It's a good time. Then Hellraiser, finally watched Hellraiser for the first time. After reading the book, I wanted to watch the movie finally, and I did. Hellraiser is from 1987, and it had really great effects. It was gross. Yeah, I really liked that one. And then Empire Records from 1995, such a classic 90s movie. Like, it is just how I think of the 90s. And I really miss those record stores, going and browsing the CDs. Free Willy from 1993, such a heartwarming family movie, and it was so good. In the Mouth of Madness, a horror movie from 1994 that I had never seen before, and I wouldn't say it's my favorite horror movie, but I'm glad I watched it as a watch party with a bunch of great people. Then I watched Ghostbusters from 1984. Such a good movie with a fantastic cast and a lot of great ghosts. Then Evolution from 2001. I had never seen this before. I watched it when I went home for Easter, and it's just ridiculous, silly movie. But it was cool seeing David Duchovny in something after X Files. Like, this was right after X Files ended. Then he did Evolution. It was like a silly sci-fi comedy. Next, I watched a double feature Rick Moranis movies as a watch party. We watched Little Shop of Horrors, which I remember loving, had some really great musical numbers, and then Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, which was amazing. Still holds up and is so, so good. From 1989, it's still so great. Then the funnest movie I watched this month was Brain Dead, or sometimes called Dead Alive, from 1992, which I believe is like a indie horror movie from, I can't remember, another country. I think it was directed by Peter Jackson, which is really cool. Like, this was campy, it was funny, it was disgusting. This was a horror movie with so much gore, and I mean, it was gross. It had lots of zombies, and it was definitely a different kind of zombie movie, and it was so gross in a funny way. Okay, getting down to the last two movies. The second to the last movie I watched in April was Tremors from 1990, which is one of my favorites that I love to rewatch all the time. Can't go wrong with Kevin Bacon, right? And underground monsters. I love that movie. And then the last movie I ended up watching was another watch party for Bring It On from 2000. I remember loving that movie so much in high school. And yeah, it's still so, so good with unforgettable lines and characters. And that's everything I read and watched in April. Let me know what your favorite read or movie you watched in April was, and let me know what you thought of any of these movies or books. I'd love to hear about it down in the comments, and I'll be back very soon with another book-related video. Thanks. Bye.